Well, welcome back, Dad. Another episode of Talking Church.
Yes.
And you were talking to our staff this morning and you were sharing this teaching and you said, I got to dust that off. I said, well, why don't we dust that off for the podcast? And so you shared a story from Samuel, and we'll get there in a moment. But you preached this message at a conference, and the idea is, how do we know if the goal and the aspirations that we have for our life, what maybe we feel God had us to do, how do we know if we're actually stepping into that and that's obedience? Or how do we know if we're just striving
Right.
and we're just trying to be like everybody else, or we're trying to get the platform or get the position? Because I think it's a fine line, but I also think that there are ways we can do it humbly and approaching truly what God has for us, rather than just saying, oh, well, I want to speak at conferences, or I want to, become the worship leader that writes the hit song, or I want to be the person who has the kids curriculum that is used in every church, whatever it is where people find themselves. But what are some ways that we can think about this? And I know there's a lot of Bible stories that are examples, but striving is something that we all struggle with.
Yeah. And I struggled with it too when I was younger. Now I'm like, it's the opposite. I'm not striving and I'm seizing opportunities and I'm like trying to push things onto other people. But I do remember it so clearly. And like I say, dusting it off. I taught this years ago because somebody said, I'm watching you get onto platforms, into positions of influence, and it looks like it's just coming naturally. And the person even admitted, I'm trying so hard to get there and it's not happening. And I just thought, there are people that are striving to get there, and there's other people that are just seizing what is in front of them. And so I developed it into that teaching, striving versus seizing. And the reason I thought of it today was we read it in our devotions, and it just reminded me, which I love, by the way, our SOAP, Scripture, Observation, Application, Prayer. Thank you, Wayne Cordero, for that. 2 chapters a day and a proverb a day, and it just takes you through the Bible. But it brings things like time release, and boom, that one just jumped off the page with the story of Ahimaaz.
You do a proverb a day. It's not official. And so,
No, it's not official, but I always do a proverb of the day, every day. Yeah.
So reading in Samuel. Maybe for those who are unfamiliar with the story, I know there's a lot of pastors and church leaders listening, so maybe they know the story, but there's a lot of stories in the Bible, and so it's easy for them to be forgotten. Can you kind of recap that story? What made you develop that teaching from that?
So, by the way, and I love the Old Testament stories. I read more of what Paul wrote because it was written to the early church. And if I'm ever looking for something and I'm stumped, I just go there. But I love the Old Testament stories and the value that we get from them. And in 2 Samuel 18, there's the story of Ahimaaz. And so let me back up. There's the story of Absalom. Absalom has been betraying his father, which is a whole another teaching where he's like, if only there was somebody like me that could hear that. If only there was somebody like me. And if you're in leadership and you're saying, if only there was somebody like me, you might be being disloyal to your leader. But Absalom's disloyal, mounting a rebellion. And David's like, take it easy on Absalom, but stop him. And the story tells us that Absalom dies. And so Joab, the military general, he has to send somebody to David to tell him, like, Absalom is dead. And Ahimaaz is like, this is my moment. I'm going to jump up. I'm going to run and tell the message to David. And Joab's like, no, you do not want to deliver this message. And Ahimaaz is like, yeah, I do. And you're holding me back. And it's interesting in the story, Joab says, there will be a day. I think it's verse 20. He's like, there will be a day. Today's not that day. And so he gives the message to an Ethiopian guy, and the guy's running. And Ahimaaz is so angry that he doesn't have a message, and he's got this youthful exuberance. He's like, give me the message, give me the message. And so Joab's like, all right. He gives him like a meaningless message. You're tracking with me? Ahimaaz passes the Ethiopian. He's just a really fast runner. And as he's running to give the message to King David, David sees him in the distance. He's like, I know that guy. That's Ahimaaz. He probably has a good message. And then he goes there, has a partial message, doesn't have the message the king needs. And then the Ethiopian guy catches up and says, Absalom's dead. And then David goes into grieving. Okay, there's a lot in that story, though. And when I read that and thought about striving versus seizing, I thought about young leaders that are like, Give me a message, give me a message, give me an opportunity, give me the platform, give me the breakout session. I want to be the keynote speaker. I want to, give me the followers. I got something to say. Why doesn't anybody like my video? And there's just all this like, I want to build a platform. And it's a striving for something that isn't theirs. And you think leadership is holding you back, but they're not. They actually are trying to protect you, and they're trying to say, yeah, you're going to have a day, but today is not the day. And I'm trying to protect you from getting on that platform before you are able to handle it, and giving you enough to have a message that when you get there, you have something to say. And so Ahimaaz strives for the moment, has nothing to say, and that's it. And yet there's other people, contrast that with David. David's just guarding the sheep, and he kills the lion, and he kills the bear, and then there's a giant that's there, and he's like, hey, Goliath, is there not a cause? I'm going to stand up, and he seizes his moment. You want to be David, not Ahimaaz.
Totally. I think the challenge for most leaders, though, is trying to distinguish between the two, right?
Oh, yeah.
Your own desire versus, okay, is this an opportunity where should have David said, I'm ready to go out and fight. I'm ready to be in the battle. Now we know the story that wasn't what he did, and that's why God exalted him. But there are other people who would say, I feel like I'm ready to go. I'm ready to fight. I'm ready to stand up.
It's more complex than you realize. And even take David and Goliath, for instance. It was David's moment. Like, we know it from history. Like, that was his moment. And yet, what do his own brothers do? You are trying to make a name for yourself. You come out here delivering us our cheese sandwiches, and you're trying to make a name. Look at you, striving, trying to get in front of the king. I mean, literally, even when you're doing the right thing, when it's your moment, people will question your motives, and that's what makes it so difficult. So if they're going to question you when it's right, and you want to get there, people are just like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to promote myself, and I'm going to try to get there as fast as I can. It's incredibly complex to figure out if you're striving or if you're seizing.
Yeah, I mean, you think about social media as a great example right now. Pastors, I taught this at conference a couple of years ago. I said, maybe you're a young leader and you criticize, I'm never going to be a pastor that posts sermon clips on Instagram, and then you preach a sermon, and then you're like, well, I mean, I'll post it this time because I preached. And when you get in that seat, it's much different. And so you criticize, and the quote that I shared at that breakout, as I said, don't criticize other people in positions you want to be in, because you might be criticizing your future self.
Exactly. And I did that. We used to go on road trips as a staff, and we'd go visit other churches. And I remember we went to Willow Creek, and I said, hey, do you ever meet with Pastor Bill? Like, do you ever meet with him? And he's like, oh, no, we never. I mean, I see him at staff meeting, And I was like, I left, and I'm telling my staff of 4, I will never be like that. I will. And yet at our staff meeting, I think today you mocked me even. And you're like, it's the only time he'll be here this month. I think you did say that.
I might have.
You have a gift of that. Like, it's
a gift of what? Cynicism?
The gift of taking shots at your dad because you can, and other people are too afraid. But
hopefully they're fair.
Boom.
As long as they're fair.
Yeah, they're fair.
Justice will be served.
But anyways, so here I am. Like, remember the classic stories? We hired this one guy, and I was like, dude, you look like you should be on our team. You look like you fit our staff. He's like, yeah, you hired me. I'm like, oh, we did? I was at a conference, and I didn't even know the guy worked for us. It just happens when you get large enough. You can't meet with everybody, and you can't know every decision. I used to know where every single thing in the church was: the coffee, the stir sticks for the coffee, the wet wipes for the nursery. I knew where everything was in every closet. I knew how to turn on the sound system. I couldn't turn on anything. Like, I would walk into the room and be like, help. And so you just change, and you need to know certain things. You don't need to know other things. And somebody else hires them, somebody else takes care of them, and you're building a large organization, and so you don't know everyone, but everyone is known, because I know somebody's going to criticize, see, that's why I don't like big church. Well, you don't have to know everyone, but everyone has to be known, okay? That's the key thing. But anyways, I was criticizing my future self, and I didn't even know it, and it was wrong to do.
Yeah, but back to opportunities that you're grabbing. I mean, I think that people... Maybe you're trying to grow your voice and your platform because you want to grow your church. Maybe you're trying to you're an evangelist and you want to get more speaking opportunities, and it feels like a part of your call. Again, I think you can look at anything that we're talking about from a cynical view or from an optimistic view. You could say, oh, well, they're just doing that because they want more money, or they're doing that because they want more notoriety. I think those are absolutely true. We've talked about that on previous podcasts about just pride and things of that nature. So I don't want to discount any of that. But I do think for most people, they're living in the tension of, I want to remain humble, but I do want this to grow.
Right. There's a tension there because the Bible says, let another man praise you and not yourself. And then there's I want to steward. So I got the challenge of, I want to steward what I have. I don't want to self-promote. But I also want to say, I'm willing to step up. I mean, David didn't say, I'll just sit here and wait till they pick me. He volunteered. So this tension that's going on here, which is crazy. And think about this. I remember years ago reading a thing saying Christianity is incredibly hard. And it was saying in this way that not only do you have to do right, but you have to do right for the right reasons. God's going to judge your actions and your motive. I mean, so all of this is working against you, but I think the biggest thing to realize is, do you want to glorify God and build his kingdom and his glory, or are you trying to build yours? And that is you can't even ask other people, do you think I'm building God's kingdom or me? But how many know, when you can see it, when you see it, you're like, it looks like striving. It sure does look like that.
But don't you think that, there are people, and again, this is what's so hard, and I don't know that we're going to land this plane of this episode with here's the answer, but hopefully just an external process from us. It's so hard because from the outside looking in, you can have either attitude. If you're somebody who's been ministered, I'll just use them as an example because they're such close friends, but John and Lisa Bevere.
Yep.
Massive platforms.
Right.
Some of the biggest evangelists in the evangelical world globally.
Right.
Millions of social media followers between the two of them. Great influence. But we don't call them this, but to me, it's like Uncle John and Aunt Lisa.
Sure.
We stay at their house. They're so close to us.
Right.
They're just personal friends in our life. You're on their board, and they speak at our church a lot. But I see them up close, but not a lot of people have the ability to see them up close. But then on the other side, you'd have people that say, oh my goodness, I've been so blessed by their ministry. And I'm, a fan is the wrong word, but I'm just grateful for them. I've been so blessed by their ministry. I may never meet them, but I read their books. I love what they do so much for me. But then there's other people that find themselves, wow, they only got here because of this, or they only got here because of that. How do you know that when the voices that are against you are antagonistic are actually maybe the right voice that you should be listening to? Again, I'm not speaking about John and Lisa here, but the critics are right versus I just need to brush them off, and I'm falling. Because I think it can be a fine line of no, I'm not going to listen to the critics. I'm not going to listen to those people. I'm God's man of faith. I'm you doing what he called me to do.
There's a difference between peers and mentors. And that's what I've had to distinguish. Peers can sometimes promote you and push you into terrible decisions, like Rehoboam. They're like, you tell them your dad's had no pressure compared to you. So peers can do that. Also, there's sibling rivalry, so they can be jealous of you. So peers are always a tough place to get your direction, affirmation, second voice. But a mentor looks at you and says, hey, I want you to succeed. I want you to do good. I want you to get where God wants you to be. And so you want to listen, is it a peer or is it a mentor that is speaking in your life? And I think you should listen to mentors, people with experience. That has been a helpful thing for me. And my mind is going a million miles an hour. I'm thinking about even Jesus' disciples. So here's what I was going to say. You go back and forth between striving and seizing. I think you never end. It's a back and forth. Jesus' disciples are like, hey, we want to know who gets to sit on your right and who gets to sit on your left. And even their own mother was like, let my boys have your right and your left. There's a striving that's going on. And yet then Jesus goes to Peter and is like, seize this moment, feed my sheep. And he says, step up to it. So it's but back and forth.
He also says in that, the cup you're asking for, you can't take.
Right. And he's like, you're striving for something that you can't handle when you get it. And even in my own life, I think about this. Like, I'll give a couple examples. When I was at Hillsong Conference years ago, and I was kind of having a bad attitude that I'm sitting in the back by the missionaries, and I got all the VIPs up there, and I kind of was like, man, I kind of got a back row. And God's like, really? You're gonna have that attitude? You're striving to get up in the front, and you think you're all that? And I'm having a breakdown moment, and God's like, you're nothing. Like, it's not about you. And I'm like, you're right. I repent, and I had a bad attitude, and I repent, and I say, God, I'm going to love these missionaries like nobody else has loved them, which has helped us start churches in Japan and all around the world. And in that moment, the next day, Joel LaBelle comes up to me and he says, hey, we're looking for somebody to do a pastor's breakout session, and I thought of you. And he goes, you're going to do a Q&A with Brian. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And in front of 900 pastors, I'm going to do a Q&A. And so I jotted down all these thoughts about communication and the topic that we're going to be on. And then Brian comes up and goes, hey, you're not going to do a Q&A. We're not going to do that. I go, oh, we're not? He goes, no, you're going to teach. I'm going to give you 25 minutes. You're going to teach. I went from bad attitude at a conference with 25,000 people to teaching 900 pastors in a moment. And then after I was done, God said, I know how to get you on the platforms I want to get you on. You keep your heart pure. Oh, I mean, amazing. And then let me take the other side. When I put my name in to be executive presbyter with the Assemblies of God, they had bios of everybody and all these things. And for some reason, we're at this national convention and my bio is blank. They didn't fill in anything. Everybody else has, he did this. He loves his dog. He's the greatest guy in the world. And mine is literally blank. And I'm looking at this like, are you kidding me? What in the world? And I'm thinking, how am I ever going to get there? And then I got elected. And again, God reminded me, I can get you on the platforms. Trust me. Stop striving. Because if you strive, you become the problem.
It was maybe a bit of reverse psychology there. Like the blank people are like, ooh, yeah, that speaks.
He's
like,
so
yeah,
good.
he's
He
so
has
humble.
Nothing. He's humble. He won't even answer the questions.
There's always a perspective.
See, that's the perspective you bring sometimes.
Yes.
You're like,
yes.
you can just say the cynical thing.
That's the perspective you bring sometimes. You can just say the cynical thing. Oh, thank you.
Like I conspired to have it blank.
Yes. There's another situation I think a lot of people find themselves in, and that's they feel like there's a lid where they're at church. I'll use this example of a friend who we still have a great relationship with. I didn't ask him if I had permission, but sorry, Sam. But Sam Grasso, he was on our team, and he grew up in our church.
Great guy.
Amazing pastor, and he was a youth pastor doing an amazing job, and he felt like he was called to be kind of the next-gen pastor over a whole church.
Yeah.
And we thought, do you want to be a campus pastor? And he said, I just don't feel like that's the path for me. I want to do next gen for a few more years. And Pastor Terry Parkman, who many who are listening know, was recently in that role within a couple years. And so we felt Terry's in the right role and we don't want him to move right now. And so Sam felt like, you know what, I think that means I'm supposed to go. And he left, went to a church in Oklahoma.
Did a great
job, traveled, spoke at camps, and then ended up feeling called to come back here, planted in a community. Right. You were in conversation about maybe where would be a good place for them to go. They ended up taking over another church, kind of rebranding it, doing great. They're part of the network, super involved. It's a great win story.
Really is.
But in that moment, he felt like there's more in me, but there's somebody else in this organization that also is doing a great job. And so two people can't have the same role. And so he felt like his opportunity was to leave. Can you just talk about that? Like for people who feel like, is it a lid? And again, that example is where he left. There's other examples where people have stayed and felt like they were maybe wanting the role and God opens a new door in a different direction.
Right.
So sometimes you go, sometimes you stay, but maybe talk about what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, with Sam, he was very honoring of authority, came in, spoke to me, said, what do you see? I did say there's more in you. I see a pathway forward. Matter of fact, I had switched him with another campus and moved him because I felt there was more in him, and he took over and grew that campus. So we'd already made moves to keep growing him. And I looked at him, I said, you're right. The position that you need to step into isn't available, and we release you with our blessing. And I wanted to see him develop because leaders can see the potential in people. And I think that'd be a great thing to tell everybody, like, have the courage to ask your leader what they see in you in potential and limitations. Most people don't want to do it. And then we agree with the potential and disagree with the limitations usually. But so he did that, and he handled it the right way. And yet other people have handled it the wrong way, like kind of like, you're holding me back. And then they peel out and they can't hold the platform because the character isn't developed, or they weren't willing to look at their limits and their limitations and liabilities. So Sam did it amazing, and love to see him back in Minnesota. I'm trying to think of other people that, there's a sense of entitlement, and they start to love the amenities of what the platform will get them and the notoriety of what the platform will get them. And they love all the wrong things.
What do you mean amenities?
Well, I mean, the travel, the people picking you up, the
Like people want to be with you.
the people, the doors that open, and you start loving the amenities rather than the responsibility. And so, they I don't know, it's a sad thing when people get that way. I'm like, yeah, these things come with it, but there's a responsibility, and I've got to steward it well, and I've got to make sure that my heart doesn't turn to the left or the right. I've got to stay focused on what God has called me to do.
How do you avoid some of that, or what have you done to kind of keep yourself humble to where you're, at least in the Twin Cities, when you walk around, it's funny, most people recognize you by your voice.
It is true.
And so
That
you're
is
walking
true.
around talking, and someone will kind of be walking around and go, I heard you in the aisle in the grocery store. I heard you at the restaurant, and I came
Yeah.
over. They recognize you that way. But how have you combated this sense of entitlement? We've talked about more of the moral side of things a
Right,
lot, but
right.
again, just personal. You know what? I'm pretty hot stuff. I'm pretty great. Look at the church that I built. Look at the notoriety that I have and the influence that I've been able to create here for myself. Again, that's obviously not the right attitude, but it's easy to feel that way. No matter if you have a church of 10,000 or a church of 100, you go, look at I started this church. I built it from 10 people. There's now 10 times as many that are coming. There's people that are giving hundreds of thousands of dollars to this church. Look at me. I'm pretty good.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you're just making me think of entitlement or self-centered. It doesn't matter how big or small you are, it can infect you. Like, I've seen guys in church softball hit a home run and fling their bat like it was MLB and they just won the World Series. And you're like, it's church softball in a town of 10,000. Like, there's 8 churches. So what? So that can hit you no matter how big you are or small, and it's in all arenas. So it's not just mega church or whatever, or CEO. For me, I'm reminded it's not about me. And I guess it really helps as a Christian. It's about Jesus. There's only one name people need to remember. And I've shared this before, but the story of Gideon hit me, where Gideon says, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. And I was like, God, why did you let Gideon say his name? And God's like, I'll put you in the credits, but I get all the glory. Like, I'll say who I worked through, but never forget it was me working through you, and I get all the glory. And so I'm content with, okay, God, if my name goes by on the screen zoop, at the end, I'm just glad that you said that you were able to use me and it was a privilege, but you get all the glory. So that's how I've been able to avoid it. It's his name. And then it's just remembering that people mentored you, people helped you, people opened doors, they gave you opportunities, and being thankful for that. And then trying to give that opportunity to others. And I will say this, it was dangerous for me when I was in my 20s, 30s, 40s. Really.
It's a long time.
It is, but it's when you're building your name and your platform or whatever. And all of a sudden I hit 50 and it was like, it's not about me. I don't last forever. And then when I became a grandpa, I was like, oh my goodness, it's about legacy. I don't last forever. And then you even said in our staff time, 100 years from now, you won't be here. And we're all like, yeah, because it's not about us. And so you just realize it's not about you, and you want to steward the platform that he gives you. Whatever he gives you, steward it well, handle it well, deflect all the praise and glory to him, and handle it well. But it's easier said than done.
How have you learned to trust leaders who are above you, that to discern whether or not they are that Joab that is trying to save you from an embarrassing situation, trying to hold you back from maybe a situation you're not ready for, or versus somebody that's maybe is holding you back and is out of their own pride or own ambition or own insecurity, or maybe it's not even any of those things as serious, but it's just they don't see your gift. They don't see the work you do. Again, maybe you're in kids ministry and you say, I'm doing such a great job, but my pastor's in the adult service every week and he never sees what's going on. So the only thing he bases it off of is the feedback of a few people that he knows or his kids and one of his kids is kind of a rascal and he doesn't like me. And so it's like, but I know that I'm really doing a good job.
Well, and my first church, the advice that was given to me as youth pastor was every week give your pastor a report of everything that you did. And he just said, give him a report of everything you did that week so he knows. And when people ask, like, what happened or what'd you do? And he said, you'll prove your value and your worth. And so I was like, okay. So I've always just given a good account of what I've done, not like bragged on it, but just given an account like, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm speaking to this as you want. I've also just valued people that have gone before me. You have to value your elders and those that have gone before you. And have that honor, because here's the thing. If you honor the people in authority, like you say, or you have a Joab who's above you or whatever, if you honor people in authority, they have the key to unlock your platform or your opportunities because they're in authority. And the last thing they want to do is give it to somebody who's not honoring. So you honor.
How do you know if you're honoring versus sucking up?
Oh, but no, honoring truly is coming from your heart, and it goes back to motive. It goes back to motive. Are you telling the truth or are you telling a story? Like a lot of times when you're kissing up, you're telling a story like, oh, you're the greatest. Nobody else is as good as you. You're telling a story. But when you're telling the truth, you're like, hey, thank you. You made a difference for everybody here. That was incredible. So truth or story is one of the things I have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that a lot of people struggle with it, but what's so interesting is when you see somebody who really is doing something. I mean, I could list many names of people on our team, but people that are doing things without motive, but are just over the top in their love and honor. And again, honor is an interesting word because honor doesn't mean you agree with everything they do. Honor doesn't mean that you are always in support of every decision they make, but it means that you respect that office or you respect the position and the platform. But it's almost like, you say in your book, Speed of Unity, you know it when you feel it. Mm-hmm. I think the same is true with honor.
I agree.
You know it when you feel it, and especially those that have the gift of discernment, but you know what? I feel like that person is there and they're striving, and you can smell it, you can feel it. My wife, she has that gift, and there's different people throughout.
She does. Yeah. We'll get done with dinner sometimes, and I'll say, "What'd you think of them?" Didn't like them. Yeah. I'm like, "Wow, that was quick."
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's what I was thinking about honor and flattery, though. When you honor someone, everybody else around you goes, "Yeah, that's true. That's true." Mm-hmm. When you're flattering people, they go, "Psst." And they roll their eyes and they, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So you look at the people around you, are you flattering or honoring?
Totally. And I also think that when someone is being talked about behind their back, again, like in a very negative way, you can think about that, but also in a positive way. Most of the time I find when someone is sharing honor, they share a story about that person. They don't share generalizations. Like if someone's really impacted them or honored them, mm-hmm. or they're really look up, they share the why versus, oh, they're amazing. They're awesome. They're incredible. They're so great. Aren't they awesome? Aren't they incredible? They're amazing. They're so great. Okay, but you didn't say why versus when you're talking, you know what? Let me tell you this story. When we were at this conference and they were super busy and they could have overlooked me. They saw me. They walked over. Like, I'll give an example. Joe Champion. Mac, when she met the champions afterwards, she said, they have great spirits. And again, that's one of Mac's gifts. And in the middle of service, I'm at Celebration Church in Austin. We're on vacation, Austin, Texas. And I mean, Celebration's building. Have you been there?
Yeah.
It's massive. I mean, gigantic. Texas, it's huge. And we were sitting, I texted Joe's son, Connor, that we were there. He ended up getting a new phone number, so he didn't get the text. So I was like, oh, whatever. We're just going to church on vacation. And we're sitting on the side section, probably 400 chairs away from Joe and Lori. I mean, you could
And he sees you.
barely even see him. One of his staff members kind of saw me and went over to Joe and kind of thought, like, I think I know who that is. Went over and kind of whispered into his ear. And Joe looks around. I saw him kind of out of the corner of my eye, way on the other side of the auditorium, looks around, walks all the way across from where he was standing, getting ready to preach, comes over, gives me a hug, gives Mac a hug, says, so glad you're here, goes back. In the middle of service, thousands of people in the room, stops the service and says, hey, my friends Logan and Mac are here today, and can we just welcome them? They're here from Minnesota on vacation, and I just want to honor them. I mean, you don't have to do that.
No.
There's no reason for him to do that. He's not trying to get clout. He wasn't doing this so that I would share his story about him. But he did it because that's who he was. And it was, you do that more for who you are than you even do for the other people. But I think that example of Mac goes, I discern that these people are just people of integrity and honor. And then they do that. It's just, it's an example. And so that's how I kind of discern. If people are really honoring you, they usually have an example versus, oh, aren't they so awesome? No, that sermon that they preached at that conference changed my life. Right. Or that event that they ministered to me, they prayed over me. It was amazing versus just, oh, aren't they? I love how great they are. They're so awesome.
I think about interrupting the services like that, but we're on video, and then it'd be like, hey, they're here. So I gotta maybe be more friendly.
Maybe they were on video. I don't know.
I gotta be more friendly. No, I'm thinking about so many different things with this, and I just want to speak to anybody that is striving. Don't strive. Let God get you on the platform. Like, you just went in there and sat in the crowd, and next thing you know, they're like, hey, we noticed you. People see that, and you got to hug Joe and gives you a shout out. And I mean, stop striving. God will get you where he wants you to be. And then I want to encourage anybody that's trying to figure out, should I seize it? We need people to seize it. We need people in a world that is full of self-promotion. We still need people that will seize the opportunity and kill the giant, that will stand up and say, here am I, send me. That will say, I want to be used by God. I'll take the arrows. I'll take the shots from people thinking that my motives are wrong. We got a world to save. We got a kingdom to build. I've got to step up and do something. And so it's okay. Like, if you have a great idea, share the idea. If you have an opportunity to step in and do it and watch what God does.
Yeah, and I think that we've seen that in our culture today. There's a lot of pastors and church leaders that have abdicated their responsibility to lead and shepherd people. And they've kind of said, well, I don't want to get involved and I don't want to speak up. And again, I think every issue needs to be prayerful in deciding what you speak up and speak out on. We've done a lot of podcasts about that. But I think that there are many people who need to step up and speak up and say, this is what I'm doing or I'm standing for. Now, in your own voice, in your own message, it may not look the same as somebody else, but I do think that from seizing the opportunity, I heard, and I don't know how, Jordan Peterson, he says, I believe that God exists. He's kind of waffled the last couple of years about, some people will go, oh, look, he's a Christian. He's had these encounters with God.
His wife and daughter seem to really
his wife, I think, has a Catholic background, and then his daughter, she got saved. And again, anyways, for those who know Jordan Peterson, great philosopher. And
you want to do a podcast with him?
Yeah, I do. When he was in town, I sent him an email. Didn't get an email back, but you got to try. I'm not striving. I'm trying to see.
You're trying to season up.
But he said, if there's something, I was at his talk that he gave in Minneapolis, and he said, if there's something that bothers the innermost part of your soul, he said, maybe that's God trying to tell you that that's your problem to fix in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, certainly that could be not true as well, but if there's something that just drives you, and I think that's what's so interesting about like the climate change protesters and all this stuff. I was thinking about it from a different perspective the other day, because you see them like destroy art and just do these things at different things.
Terrible.
It just seems counterproductive. But in the same way, they're being told, they don't have a faith. They're being told, this is the legacy of this world, is you must take care of this planet. And so their worldview is literally, we need to take care of this place, and those oils and all this stuff, which again, is the data even indicating that that's ruining our planet or whatever. I don't know. I mean, there's so much controversy around that. That's not what I'm talking about. But
I
I'm
know,
saying
because you're about to lose half your audience either way.
no,
Like,
no,
which way you
no.
go?
But my point is, whatever you believe about climate change or not, they believe that what they are doing is of the utmost importance, that they're going to get arrested, that they're going to get in trouble, that they're going to make a scene and even be ridiculed like we were talking about them right now. They believe that it is worth fighting for. Now, I don't believe that what they believe is happening is what's happening. I don't believe that fossil fuels is worth dying for, but they believe that. And I think that there are a lot of people in our world who don't have anything that is significant enough for them to stand up and speak out and to grab a hold of and seize the opportunity. If David said, you know what, let's just kind of wait it out and see if anyone else, maybe they wouldn't have defeated Goliath. Maybe the Philistines would have taken over the valley and they would have marched their way all the way to Jerusalem. Who knows? But there are people, it's like Esther, for such a time as this. I'm the person that's going to stand up, and if I perish, I perish. It's not a message of like, rah, rah, we're going to do this, but I think it is this thing. The more it wells up in you, the more I feel like maybe it is seizing rather than striving. If it's every time you're in prayer, every time you're in the presence of the Lord worshiping, when you're with other great leaders and you feel this urge, this nudge of the Spirit, that's probably seizing, versus if it's every time you're scrolling social media or every time you haven't read your devotions, then you're thinking about, oh, I could be somebody. Well, that's probably striving, right?
Right. No, and I'm thinking, again, from my, even just this morning in my morning time with the Lord, I was thinking about a song that we just wrote, the song with Overcome.
Right.
And we sang it in church on Sunday. And then I was like, that's Revelation 12:11. They overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, and they didn't love their life. And so then I went and found an old sermon on it. And in the sermon, he's like, do we have the boldness to speak up? He's like, you can't, if you're going to change the world, you got to speak up and have a boldness that says, I've overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of my testimony, and I'm going to speak up, and I don't even love my life. I've got to do what's right. And it was just a boldness thing. And so there's something when you're seizing, it's within you. Can't keep quiet. You got to say it. And I'm praying that we'll do that, but I also think there's that motive. If you're conniving for a cause or a moment, it's striving. And so there's those moments you just speak up. You're like, we've got to do this. We've got to go. And I'm thinking of this teaching, and I really do enjoy it because it's challenged me, and I hope it challenges everybody else, because it's challenged me for probably 20 years that I've been having this one roll around in my mind. Am I striving or am I seizing? Striving or seizing? And can I just say this to anybody that's waiting longer than they thought? Sometimes it's great to wait longer. Like as a football fan, I watch quarterbacks that have to sit behind somebody for years. And I'm sure they're thinking, I should be the starter. I should be the starter. I should be the starter. And then Aaron Rodgers gets his opportunity. And what does he do with it? And then you look, Jordan Love sitting behind Aaron Rodgers and is like, I should be the starter. I should be. And I think he just signed like the biggest contract ever for a quarterback because he has those multiple Super Bowl wins. Oh, wait, he's only started one season. I was like, holy cow.
We don't have much to talk about.
We don't have much to talk about, but like, I'm sorry, but yeah. But I'm just saying, like, you sit behind somebody for a while and then you get your opportunity. And, from production, I just saw out of the corner of my eye, they look to be, they're Packer fans over there.
Yeah, boo.
Yeah, they're Packer fans. And here we go. We don't have anything.
He's seizing his opportunity.
He's seizing his, but you see like, okay, take the Vikings right now. JJ McCarthy. He's like, I want to start. And they're like, you got to develop. You got to do this. You got to do this. And they love his ambition to seize, but they're like, hey, if you try to get there too soon, you'll be striving. So
now it does help when you're sitting on the bench making a couple $1 million. I will say
that does help.
Not quite what it looks like in ministry, but I do think you need to surround yourself with people. And this was just kind of the last thought that was in my head, bouncing around. But you watch sports, you watch the Olympics, you watch different things, and there are coaches that are a pivotal part. I look at golf. Some people have multiple coaches that travel with them, that help them work on their swing. And I think for me, and again, this is something that I'm working on like fresh right now. If you are so focused on what you bring and you aren't willing to ask other people for help, or you don't want feedback because you're too afraid to receive the feedback. You look at the best athletes in the world, the best leaders in the world. They're constantly getting feedback, coaches. What is one tweak? What did I do there? When it comes to sports, I think it's easy because we want to be the best we can be at sports. And it's, yeah, I'm good, but you have another perspective. But when it comes to ministry, I do think at times we almost, because it is spiritual in nature, we almost push aside the other voices and the coaches. And it's like, no, it's me and God. It's me and God. But I do think that you have to have people in your life that are able to speak in. You mentioned the mentors earlier, but I think mentors are only as good as you allow them to speak into your life. Mentors are only good, or having strong peers that are willing to share with you and say, hey, I think you're out of line. Most people, again, unless they're a really good friend, are not just going to out of the blue do that unless the Lord just drops it on their heart. But if you open yourself up to it and say, hey, talk to me about my speed. Talk to me about my character. Talk to me about, do you think I'm striving? Do you think I'm going after this? I ask people quite frequently. And
I did. I asked them a lot, and I had more people saying, you're not striving. We need you to step up. We need you to step up. And a good voice like that. Well, there's a story in the World Series lore before you were born when the Twins won a World Series.
Yeah. Never in my lifetime has a Minnesota team won.
Kirby Puckett was going to bunt. And I forget who it was. I think it was Don Baylor, but I'm not positive. But it was one of the guys that was hitting behind Kirby. And he said, you're not bunting. You're not bunting. You're Kirby Puckett. You're swinging. Like, they don't pay you that, like, go. And then he goes and hits the home run. But it literally was the guy saying to him, like, stop trying to just get on base, win this game, seize the opportunity. And somebody needs to hear that right now. You have something in you, win the game, open your mouth, stand up, run for office, do what you've been created for, and take the opportunity. And you know that where you're at. The people that need to seize, we need to push them forward. The people that are striving need to dial it back and get their motives right. But we need more people that are willing to seize things than sit back and just watch things happen.
Totally true. Well, it's a great last thought to end on. And I think that if you try to see something with the right motive and it's not the right thing, I think God's going to redirect you. But if you don't seize what's right in front of you, it's like, God's going to move on and he's going to find someone else. And so we need your voice. We need you to lean in, start whatever it is you need to start, grab a hold, preach whatever it is you need to preach. And we're cheering you on, with the network. We're cheering you on.
Absolutely.
Along the way. I look at so many people and very rarely do I feel like, oh, they're striving, because I want to be a champion of so many people. And I know that's your heart too. And so again, I hope this has challenged those who are listening.
Yep.
And until next time, Dad, as always, thanks for talking church. Hey, thanks so much for listening to Talking Church on YouTube. If you like this podcast, make sure to click the like button below so more people can find this episode. And if you're not yet subscribed, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We're releasing a video every week with new topics related to church and ministry. So join us as we continue to talk church.